Welcome to EchoNest Media, where we dive deep into the wildest stories shaping our world. Today, we're unpacking the K-pop contract crisis. Not a scandal, not a moment, but a structural reckoning in one of the world's most powerful entertainment industries. If you think this is just about idols and agencies fighting, buckle up. The truth is bigger, messier, and far more important for the future of K-pop. The first thing you need to know is how a Korean entertainment contract actually works. Unlike Western recording deals, these aren't just agreements about music rights or revenue splits. They are full-life management contracts, legally binding documents that govern training, housing, schedules, branding, creative control, and in some cases, even personal image. These contracts fall under Korea's Standard Exclusive Contract Guidelines, a framework created after earlier abuses shook the industry in the late 2000s. On paper, these guidelines are meant to ensure fairness. In practice, they leave enormous discretion to agencies who control everything from financial transparency to distribution of profits. And because companies front the cost of training and debut, the contracts give them wide latitude to recover expenses before idols see meaningful income. The second thing you need to know is how agencies calculate that investment. Training is expensive, often years of housing, food, vocal coaches, dance instructors, stylists, rehearsals, and pre-debut promotions. Agencies track these as internal costs. Some cover them entirely. Others treat them as debit balances that must be repaid from future earnings. It's a system that sounds reasonable until you realize idols typically split profits among multiple members while the agency collects its share off the top. When fans say, "How does a group this huge not make more money?" This is why. The ledger starts at negative, and even when it turns positive, the distribution isn't equal. One industry lawyer once joked, if a trainee saw the accounting spreadsheets early, they might quit immediately. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. The third thing you need to know is how revenue splits actually work. Fans see album sales, tour numbers, and streaming milestones and assume everyone gets rich. But the economic engine of K-pop runs on brand deals, endorsements, and global campaigns. The multi-million-dollar contracts for cosmetics, fashion, tech, or luxury goods. These are often classified as group revenue, meaning the company takes a hefty portion before the members divide what remains. For solo endorsements, the split can still heavily favor the agency depending on the contract. And remember, managers, stylists, staff, production, travel, and promotional expenses come out before payout. So an idol who seems everywhere, billboards, commercials, magazine covers, might still be earning surprisingly little. The imbalance wasn't malicious at first. It was built for an era when the industry was smaller, but K-pop outgrew its own accounting long ago. The fourth thing you need to know is why the 7-year rule exists. In 2009, after explosive lawsuits exposed the industry's darkest practices, Korea's Fair Trade Commission intervened and capped exclusive entertainment contracts at 7 years. This was meant to stop the so-called slave contracts that stretched a decade or more. 7 years became standard not because it was fair or optimal, but because it was legally compliant and financially convenient. Agencies believed it gave them enough time to recover investment and cultivate profits. But a lot changed since 2009. Globalization, streaming, and fandom culture turned K-pop into a multi-billion-dollar phenomenon. Suddenly, that 7-year system began to look outdated for a world where idols could generate international revenue far earlier in their careers. And that tension set the stage for everything that followed. The fifth thing you need to know is the rise of injunctions, the legal tool idols now use when negotiations collapse. An injunction doesn't terminate a contract. It suspends its enforceability while the court evaluates whether the agency breached its duties. Idols typically file injunctions citing lack of financial transparency, unfair profit distribution, or failure of the agency to protect their well-being. Once an injunction is granted, an idol can halt activities, seek independent management, or force renegotiation under court supervision. It's a high-risk move, but in today's industry it's becoming increasingly common. Injunctions used to be rare. Now they're structural pressure points a sign that the old contract system is cracking under modern expectations. The sixth thing you need to know is that government oversight is intensifying. Korea's Ministry of Science and ICT and the Fair Trade Commission have both proposed updated guidelines addressing transparency, trainee protection, mental health safeguards, and more rigorous accounting disclosures. These aren't symbolic. They're responses to years of complaints about opaque financial statements, unclear cost deductions, and power imbalances between young performers and billion-dollar corporations. Regulators aren't trying to weaken K-pop. They're trying to stabilize it before the world sees another high-profile collapse or exploitation narrative. And honestly, they're overdue. The seventh thing you need to know is that the HYBE ADOR case wasn't just a headline, it was a case study in how the industry's power structures collide. At its core, the fight revolved around control, creative authority, financial oversight, contract interpretation, and the boundaries between a label and its subsidiary. When internal audits, public statements, and legal filings became global news, it exposed the machinery fans rarely see. The dispute highlighted how complex entertainment contracts truly are. Overlapping agreements for management, production, intellectual property, and group branding. Whether people sided with Min Hee-jin or HYBE isn't the point. The real takeaway is that the system itself was being stress-tested at the highest level, and the cracks were impossible to ignore. The eighth thing you need to know is how public pressure reshaped negotiation dynamics. 10 years ago, idols had no leverage. Today, social media gives them megaphones. When fans mobilize, companies listen, not because of sympathy, but because global reputation affects stock prices, partnerships, and regulatory scrutiny. Idols now use transparency strategically, revealing mistreatment or financial concerns to create public accountability. Companies, once untouchable, must respond or risk losing not just profit, but trust. And trust is the real currency in K-pop's global expansion. The ninth thing you need to know is what 2025 forced companies to change. Investors, regulators, and even advertisers began demanding clearer financial statements, more responsible management practices, and better documentation of how revenue is divided. Agencies now face expectations to justify deductions, disclose major expenses, and demonstrate compliance with the standard exclusive contract. It's not glamorous, but it's transformative. When billions are at stake, vague accounting stops being acceptable, and the industry is finally being asked to grow up. And the 10th thing you need to know is that this crisis isn't a collapse, it's an evolution. Every global entertainment industry eventually hits a turning point when success outpaces structure. Hollywood had it, J-pop had it, now K-pop is facing its own reckoning. If the industry adapts, with fairer contracts, clearer transparency, and real protection for idols, the next generation will debut into an era of stability rather than survival. If it doesn't, the legal battles of 2025 will look tame compared to what comes next. Either way, this moment will be remembered as the year K-pop decided what it wants to become. An empire built on artistry and fairness, or a machine weighed down by its own ambition.